Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first edition of Winning 2021, where you get to meet the Victory Fund's endorsed candidates. And we have a really exciting show for you today. It's a show of historic firsts, and it's in the great state of New York, in the Big Apple, the biggest city in the country, where we are poised to lose all LGBTQ representation on that city's council if we don't elect some of the people, actually all the people on this call today. And once again, I'm Sean Malloy. I am the Vice President of Political Programs at LGBTQ Victory Fund, and so excited to have you tuning in today. If you have any questions for the people on this call, feel free to type them in the comments, and we'll go ahead and try to ask them. And so I'm going to start off by introducing our great candidates. Firstly, from the Bronx, District 35, we have Elisa Crespo running for City Council to make history, not only in a special election on March 23rd, but in a regularly scheduled primary in the beginning of the summer. Welcome.
Thank you, Sean. And it's District 15.
15. Oh my gosh.
That's okay.
Sorry.
It happens. We're allowed to make mistakes. It is District 15 in the heart of the Bronx. And the neighborhoods in that district are Fordham, Tremont, Allerton, Olinville, West Farms, Mount Hope, Belmont, Bedford Park. It's really the heart of the Bronx, everything sort of surrounding the Bronx Zoo and the Botanical Garden. And as Sean said, my name's Elisa Crespo, and I am running for City Council. I do have the great honor and privilege, I say that sarcastically, of having a special election happening on March 23rd, 3 months before everyone else. The rest of my colleagues who will be coming on momentarily are running in June, but I'm also running in June, right, to hold on to the seat, right? Should I win the special, obviously we want to continue that for a full term, beginning in the beginning of 2022. So yes, thank you so much for having me here, Victory Fund. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely, we are so happy to have you not only running but also joining us today. Next, I believe from District 35, I transpose the numbers there, we have Crystal Hudson, who would be the first queer Black woman ever elected to the City Council of New York. Hello, Crystal.
Hello, thank you for having me. And yes, I'm in District 35 in Brooklyn, which includes the neighborhoods of Crown Heights, Prospect Heights, Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, and Bedford-Stuyvesant. I am a first-generation American, a third-generation Brooklynite, and I'm the only child of a single mother living with Alzheimer's disease. It was through my caregiving experience for my mother that I got into public service. After seeing her spend over 40 years as a nurse caring for New Yorkers, it felt like when it was time for her to receive care, there was none for her. And so that's what got me into public service and one of the many reasons why I'm running for City Council today.
Absolutely excellent. Thank you for being here as well. And last, but certainly not least, from District 7, we have Marti Allen-Cummings, who would also make history as the first non-binary person ever elected to the New York City Council and the first drag performer ever elected in the state of New York and almost the country. Welcome.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here with you, Sean, and Victory Fund, and of course, Crystal and Elisa, who I adore, and I'm so excited for their races as well. It's great to be here because this is all about coalition building and making sure that we're electing true progressive voices, queer voices, and voices that are representative of our communities. So I'm excited to be part of this Victory Fund coalition for New York.
Absolutely. And I'll start off by saying these are just some of our amazing New York candidates. We have endorsed a whole slate of people because to reemphasize, all of our members that are currently serving are termed out. So that if these people do not win, we will not be represented in the country's largest city. And so a reminder of that. And you can help support all three of these candidates as well as our other slate on the 23rd. We'll be sharing a link here where you can donate directly to our candidates, split between our New York City Council candidates. So excited to have all three of you here. All three of you are amazing activists in your community, and I deliberately use the word activists. You have all been on the front lines to help make sure that the people in your community are effectively represented. And so I wanted to firstly ask about that activism and what you saw and what you did and how that propelled you to running for office. And so why don't we go ahead and start with Elisa? Go ahead.
Sure. So I'm the product of the same public institutions that I think that we need to revitalize here in our city. So we're talking public housing, public transportation, and public schools. And having been raised by a working class mom, someone who, despite her best efforts, working many low-wage jobs, still had to rely on the social safety net. I had a firsthand lived experience of what the inequities are in our city, which, by the way, New York City is one of the richest cities in all of America, but it's one of the most segregated and one of the most unequal. And so I really began organizing as a student leader. When I was at the City University of New York, myself and many other Black and Brown students really fought hard and unapologetically to preserve the affordability and the accessibility of our public higher education system here in New York City. And that experience brought me into close proximity with legislators. It showed me the power of organizing, and it showed me that this was the kind of work that I wanted to continue doing. And so after graduating with a political science degree, I started working for elected officials. Most recently, I got to serve on a borough-wide capacity as the education liaison to the Bronx Borough President's Office. And the work that I did there mainly consisted of advocating for special education students with individualized education plans, advocating for their parents, making sure that their parents understood their rights in the IEP process, which many parents are not aware of, that they play an actual role in that process of trying to figure out what are the services that their children need. And, we did a lot of work with census outreach, making sure that families in the Bronx knew about the census and that it was okay, regardless of your legal status, to complete the census, and educating people on the importance of filling out the census for the borough of the Bronx, which happens to be the poorest borough in the entire city of New York. The one with the largest amount of food insecurity, the highest evictions. So really making sure folks filled out that 2020 census was so important to our borough. And, in an individual capacity, I've been working with grassroots organizations on the ground here in the Bronx. One of them named Allerton Allies, which has been addressing food insecurity in the Bronx. We've worked together to do distributions, to bring community fridges, and to really make sure that folks in the Bronx have healthy, nutritious food. And of course, I have been on the ground on the front lines, in the biggest social justice sort of demonstrations here in New York City this past summer. It was a summer of demonstrations and protests. The murder of George Floyd really sparked a new generation of New Yorkers of all backgrounds, straight, gay, bi, trans, non-binary. And what we saw was coalition building. We saw queer folks, we saw heteronormative people work together and really demand social, racial, and economic justice in the streets of New York City. And I was definitely out there. Marty, my comrade, was also out there a lot on the streets, as was Crystal. And I think it's important, just to sort of wrap up this sort of piece here, that as my good cis, someone who I've not met but who I admire, a Black trans woman leader, her name's Raquel Willis, who says the same hate that fuels white supremacy is the same hate that fuels homophobia and transphobia, and a conscious society understands that we are at war with both. True words, absolutely. Crystal, tell us a little bit about how your activism has propelled you to run for this position.
Yeah, I've always been involved in my community and an advocate for my community. My path to public service is a little bit different. I spent, over 10 years working in sports marketing in a completely unrelated field. And it was really through my experience as a caregiver for my mother that got me into public service and, made me want to serve on behalf of my community and my people. Just seeing firsthand how difficult it is for so many of us to get access to services and resources, as we've seen most recently with the vaccine rollout here in New York. It's been incredibly infuriating to see, these systems that say we prioritize older folks and those who are most vulnerable and people of color, and yet we make it so incredibly difficult for those same people to get access to the vaccine. They have to jump through so many hoops, and those are the reasons, that I sort of became activated. I started a mutual aid organization in my neighborhood, the Greater Prospect Heights Mutual Aid Group, at the start of the pandemic, just because I had seen, as somebody who had worked in city government, how we have access to information, but we just aren't doing enough with that information. And so I was quite honestly concerned for my community. I wanted to make sure that people had access to real-time resources and updates, information that we could mobilize and get people the groceries and food and prescriptions that they needed at what was, obviously a very difficult time for everyone. We're still making weekly grocery deliveries to those in need, many of whom happen to be undocumented Black immigrants. So it's a lot of that work that has continued to drive me to do the work that I do in service of my community.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you. And Marty, tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing and how that plays into you running for office.
Well, I'm so in awe of Crystal and Elisa and the work that they have done in their communities and for our city. And, like you mentioned at the beginning of this forum, I am a drag artist. That's what I've been doing for almost my entire adult life, and that's given me the experience of working in our small businesses, our bars and our restaurants, being a gig worker who knows what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck in a city that's increasingly built for the wealthy, which is something so many New Yorkers struggle with. When the first of the month comes around, which bill gets paid and which bill doesn't? And that's been exacerbated because of the pandemic. But the art of drag has also taught me about political action. Doing drag in itself is a form of political resistance, right? So drag taught me about community building and community organizing all the way back years and years ago when we were taken to the streets for Occupy Wall Street, which, I was a baby then, I feel. And now I have a couple little wrinkles here. But back in the day, taking to the streets, standing up for what we believed in. And then, it taught me that politics is local. What happens on your block matters. Like, your voice makes a difference, and all politics is local. So we need to engage our communities, bring people together, because it is intersectional, right? Like, environmental justice and housing justice is racial justice. We have, in my district where I live, there's 3 school districts that make up the area I'm running to represent. And one of those districts is the most segregated school district in the city because of people who say, oh yeah, I'm progressive, I just don't want those people here. That's BS. It's 2021. There's no room to discriminate against anyone. We need to work together and fight for the most vulnerable, marginalized voices among us. And on the city level, we can do that with our budgeting and how we're zoning districts, making sure that it's reflective of the needs of the community. And so a lot of times people say, well, how have you as a drag artist, how has that prepared you for this? Drag has prepared me for it because it's taught me about being on the ground, pulling my boots up and getting to work. And Crystal talked about mutual aid. We've been hitting the streets every Wednesday, handing out PPE and warm meals and clothes to our unhoused and food insecure neighbors who the city has frankly forgotten. We need to make sure that we're looking out for our neighbors who are living on the street. And far too often in New York, people turn a blind eye or they protest and say, we don't want those people here. Well, I'm running to represent everyone, whether you're living on the street, whether you're eligible to vote for me or not, which there's a bill in city council right now where we need to make sure that our immigrant community is able to vote in municipal elections. So we're in this for everyone. And I'm excited to be in the race, and I'm excited to have amazing friends and colleagues like Elisa and Crystal who share these values, so we can get into City Hall together and on day one put through legislation that's going to help the most amount of people.
Yes, please. You all have amazing stories of activism, and I think would be amazing leaders. You've already been leading in your communities, but this has been a very tough time with COVID, as you mentioned a bit, Marty. It's not over. The pandemic is not over. And New York was one of the worst afflicted, in the world earlier on in the pandemic. And so how have you been not only engaging, right, in your continued activism during the pandemic, but how are you campaigning, right? How are you actually talking to voters? Tell us a little bit about those tactics and how people can potentially even help. Elisa, would you like to go first?
Absolutely. I think all of us have had to sort of transition into these digital tactics, right? Contacting voters, whether it be through phone banking or through text banking, through postcard writing, using social media, trying to do literature drops where, you're not necessarily knocking the doors of folks, but, sliding your literature, perhaps, putting it on their doorknob or something, holding space out in public parks and doing tabling. Like, we've all had to sort of figure out how do we campaign during COVID in a city that has had one of the highest, infection rates. And I think that in the beginning it was quite difficult for some of us, but I think we've all kind of figured out how to go about it. We've kind of figured out how we can still engage voters and do that safely. But that's absolutely been a challenge, particularly as it relates to petitioning. There's a big movement now to figure out what are we going to do with petitions. There are hundreds of city council candidates running in New York City, borough president candidates, controllers, mayoral, and we have to collect signatures to get our names on the ballot. And so there's a discussion happening on how we can do that in a safe way.
Yeah, Marty, Crystal, anything you'd like to add to that?
I would just say, it's campaigning is difficult and stressful as it is. And then you throw a worldwide pandemic and it's wild. But this is, so like Elisa said, like we're finding alternate ways through phone banking, text banking, just lit drops, outdoor social distance events, town halls that people can join us. We have our healthcare town hall on the 24th if you want to tune in. So finding alternate ways. But campaigning in a pandemic also, I think, showed so many of us why we're running, to be of service to other people. There's a lot of people who run for office because they like a job title and power and they think it's what they're entitled to. And then there's people who are running, like the people on this call. Sorry, my dog is barking. No. So he's very excited for my run too. It shows us why we're running, to be of service to other people. And this pandemic, we have to put our campaign to the side some and really show up for our communities. But the main goal is to keep people safe in this. I'm going to mute so I can get him. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I think Marty and Elisa have touched on it. Running historic campaigns the way that the three of us are is always challenging. I always say, people are often surprised to hear that I would be the first gay Black woman elected in New York City. But I've seen firsthand why we haven't been, the hoops we have to jump through, sort of the anti-Blackness, the racism, the misogyny, the double standards, it's all a lot. It's challenging for sure. And I think, to Marty's point, like layering on a global pandemic and the economic crisis that we're in, the racial reckoning that Elisa mentioned earlier, it's all a lot. But I think again, to echo what Marty said, I think for me, the silver lining in all of this is the fact that people like us get the opportunity to run, and we're running because we want more for our communities. We're running because we've seen firsthand what we have not been able to get access to ourselves or for our families. And we want to make sure that ends, and that we can actually affect change and come in with big, bold, transformational ideas that we can actually move forward in a time like this. This is the opportunity for us to throw out all of those big ideas that we've been talking about for a long time that nobody has really had the courage to actually move on. This is the opportunity to do that, because there's absolutely nothing to lose. We've already lost so much already.
No, absolutely. Now, like a quick question for you, right? What would be the first thing, if you could just move it when you're elected, what would be the first thing that you'd want to propose and get through? Just real quickly, Elisa.
I have a couple. They're all related to workforce development. I'm running in the district that has a very, very high unemployment rate. A third of our folks here have less than a high school education. And over half of the single mothers with children under 5 are living in poverty. And so attacking and dismantling Great Depression levels of unemployment in the Bronx, poverty, racially concentrated poverty, is my number one goal and mission. And I think it's time, Crystal alluded to big, bold ideas. It's time for public option for employment. Sort of like the preliminary step to a job guarantee. It's time that we create pathways into city service jobs for targeted vulnerable populations, for the LGBTQ community, for seniors, for people with disabilities, for homeless, for formerly incarcerated folks who have historically been marginalized from the private sector. It's time that the city step up and give these people skills and put them on a pathway to middle-class jobs in our municipal government that we know comes with all of the benefits of organized labor, from healthcare benefits to pensions. And I would also like to see a year-round universal youth employment program, similar to what we have for the summer youth employment program, but we shouldn't discriminate winter, fall, and spring.
Excellent. Crystal, your one thing?
Yeah, I think for me, I think about housing and the lack of housing, of truly affordable housing that we have, not just in my district, but across the city. We have like over 60,000 people sleeping in shelter system every night. We have 100,000 students in our New York City public school system who are sleeping in shelters every night, and we need housing. And so for me, it's about overturning the ULURP system. The ULURP system is the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure that we have, which is the tool by which the city council approves or disapproves rezonings in our districts across the city. I think we need to find ways to subsidize affordable housing, build affordable housing, taking public property and making it into public benefits like housing, like social housing, and also maintaining our public housing stock and not privatizing it. So those are a few of the things that I want to make sure we handle early on in the council.
Wow, I didn't realize the numbers were that high. That's insane.
Yeah, there's no reason they should be as high as they are. That's for sure.
No, absolutely. And Marty, your first thing.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. My husband's running errands, so the dogs are just going crazy. I apologize. Part of working from home. But these are all incredible platforms and policies that I second and support. But for my first thing, I'm a big believer that environmental justice begins at the local level. And I am proposing a 3-part Green New Deal, one for our city as a whole, one for NYCHA, and one for our public schools. This will not only work to help the climate crisis, but it will also give good long-term sustainable union jobs within the communities that are impacted. And we need to make sure that our housing is healthy. We need to make sure our school system is healthy and that our ventilation systems are up to par. We need to make sure that we have green roof spaces and low energy buildings, and that we're refitting our buildings to be ones that are benefiting our city positively. So that's one of the first things I would fight for in city council. And then something else, is making sure that like I talked about earlier with the school system, we need to make sure that our schools are integrated and that our teachers are given the resources they need. And we need to make sure that we're prioritizing our students and having social workers and counselors in schools and not policing our students and contributing to the school to prison pipeline, but getting kids the resources they need. If we're funding social workers and counselors in schools, these are trained mental health care professionals who can identify if there's something going on with the kid, help them, nurture them, give them the support they need, instead of having police in schools that are going to, cause possible harm to our young people. And that's something that I'm really supportive of, making sure that we're prioritizing that not only in our legislation, but in our budgets.
That sounds great. That sounds absolutely amazing. Those all sound amazing, right? And that's exactly why we need to elect you. I'll do another pitch for the fundraiser on the 23rd. The link is in the chat. But I'd like to dive a little bit now. Elisa, you have this special election. Tell us a little bit about those dynamics, right? Richie Torres, who got elected to Congress, vacated the seat. And so the special election has been called. Tell us a little bit about the dynamics there. And then I'd love to talk about ranked choice voting and that dynamic with Marty and Crystal.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, our former councilman, now congressman, Richie Torres, won a historic election to the House of Representatives. And so, this was a year before his term was finished in the council. So it means that per New York City Charter, we do have to fill the seat. And that's why you have a special election. And that will take place on March 23rd. And the person who is victorious on that day will serve throughout the rest of what was his last term, which ends on the last day of this year. And then there will be another election on June 22nd, which is when most of the citywide and other council elections take place, which is on June 22nd. And that would be to start on January 1st, 2022 for the first official full term. And so it means that I am campaigning for a long time. It means that I am doing many things simultaneously and multitasking. It means that I am collecting signatures while getting out the vote for the special election, collecting signatures to get on the ballot for the primary, if that is what we are going to do. We're still waiting to see if some other process will be initiated in order to get on the ballot. We did have to collect signatures to get on the ballot for the special. And it just means that, all of us will be campaigning for nonstop, because our terms will be 2-year terms, not 4-year terms as per usual, because of the 10-year sort of redistricting of lines in the city of New York and in the state in general. And so it just means nonstop campaigning. But in a way, it's a good thing. It means that nonstop, engaging with people in the community, talking to them, listening to them, helping them with their concerns and getting to know the people that you're running to represent.
Yes, and it's amazing. In just a little more than a month, you're going to be on the ballot for the first time. And I totally forgot about the redistricting and the 2 years. So yeah, you are all in for a lot of campaigning. But this year, campaigns are a little different because of the new system set up for ranked choice voting. Crystal, can you tell us a little bit about that and how it's playing into your campaign?
Yes. So ranked choice voting is a new method by which we will be voting and ranking up to 5 of our favorite candidates on the ballot. New Yorkers voted for this, I think, in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And by an overwhelming majority of New Yorkers chose ranked choice voting. And ranked choice voting really allows folks like us who are considered non-traditional candidates, a real shot at winning our races. We've seen it successful in places like San Francisco and in Minneapolis, where they have elected the first Black female mayor and the first trans man ever, respectively, San Francisco and Minneapolis. And so it's an opportunity for us to continue, making a lot of firsts, particularly here in New York. It also means that we get to talk to everyone. We don't have to stop when somebody tells us they have somebody else that they've decided they were going to put as their number one candidate. We can continue talking to them and ask them to put us as their number 2 or their number 3 choices. And so we get, for me, I think it's a great opportunity for us to just talk to as many people as possible. Like Elisa said, we don't have to limit ourselves or cut ourselves off. And I think the more people we can get in front of, and the more that people are able to hear from people like us, the better off we all are for it.
No, absolutely. Marty, tell us a little bit. Are people receptive to that, or do they understand this system in the conversations you've been having?
Well, I think the city and the Board of Elections needs to do more in educating voters, because voters, Crystal said, voters overwhelmingly on the ballot supported ranked choice voting. And so now it's up to our city to educate voters. And I think they're lacking in that. So campaigns are having to kind of make up that weight. We're already going through a lot in our campaigns in a pandemic, join the hustle. And now we have to take that extra step to, educate voters on how ranked choice is going to work. And New Yorkers get it, they're quick to learn and engaged in democracy. So it will be fine. We just did a ranked choice, queer ranked choice seminar the other day. A couple candidates in my race and I have done events together, handing out our lit and PPE and telling voters like, yes, you can support both of us. You can vote for both of us. And when we do phone banking, we tell voters that as well. If somebody says, oh, well, I've known so-and-so for a long time, blah, great. These are the policies where I align with them. So put me as your number 2. And it gives you an opportunity to continue where traditionally in phone banking or street canvassing, the conversation might just end. You're able to really engage people more and get them on your side more by showing how you can rank up to 5 candidates. So I think it's been positive. I'm excited for it. And also, Crystal just said, it gives non-traditional candidates like us an opportunity to win and to reach more people. We're not just sticking to one part of the district. We're expanding throughout the whole district to hear everyone's needs and concerns and to make sure that we're implementing those needs into our policies and our positions. And I'm certainly not the establishment candidate. So this gives, a campaign like ours that extra push. And I think it's been successful and I'm excited for it.
Very exciting. Yeah, we've had candidates run in San Francisco and Minneapolis and be successful because of that system. And obviously that's extremely important. Just to reemphasize once again, we will not have any LGBTQ representation on council if we do not elect it this year. And so once again, everyone needs support. We'll put the fundraising link there again. I'm going to wind down here, give you a little bit of a softball. I recently read The Power Broker, right, about Robert Moses, infamous, institutor of, structured racism and so much that still ails, your districts, as you've mentioned. So Robert Moses, good or bad, and the connection between New York and Pittsburgh and Robert Moses. So Elisa, Robert Moses, good or bad?
Horrible. Robert Moses is responsible for the Cross Bronx Expressway, which is one of the worst expressways in New York City that not only displaced people in the process, but is a expressway that emits tons of air pollution and causes the Bronx to have one of the poorest air qualities and one of the highest rates of asthma. And the Cross Bronx Expressway runs right through my district. And it is a terrible, terrible thing. And we are now having to figure out how do we remedy that. And it will cost billions and billions of dollars. It is a environmentally racist infrastructure project and literally is responsible for probably, there is a connection between poor air quality respiratory illnesses, asthma, and the number of people who have been infected with COVID and who have ultimately passed because of it. So horrible.
All right, Crystal.
Yeah, I echo those sentiments. Robert Moses is one of the worst legacies I think we have here in New York City. And we need to do all that we can to sort of right all of his wrongs, if you will. So with Elisa on that one.
And Marty.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We have an opportunity in New York City with a new mayor, a new comptroller, and new borough presidents, and an almost brand new city council to rewrite our city to be one that is equitable, and to right the wrongs of past leaders who put through horrible policies and infrastructure that is harmful, and we're still feeling the effects. Like Elisa said, asthma rates and cancer rates in my district are alarmingly higher than other districts in Manhattan because of access to care, because of infrastructure that was put in that's harmful to low-income communities. So we have an opportunity to make our city one that is truly equitable for all New Yorkers, and it's just going to take the council and the mayor and the comptroller and everyone working together, which is why it's important, I think, to have these conversations now. So us great qualified candidates who are ready to take office are able to get in and make real change right away. So yeah, Robert Moses. Yeah.
And yes, very much. But Robert Moses he really messed up, New York City, as most of us know. But he did do some contract work, and one of the only cities he actually did contract work in was Pittsburgh, where I am right now. And unsurprisingly, he put an expressway right through the Black neighborhood, and completely destroyed it and separated it from the economic downtown. But so that's what connects us. But obviously, fixing that legacy is something I think all of you are well on your way to doing. I want to end us, we're a little bit over time. So I just want to thank all of you for not only running, right? Because stepping up to run is a huge journey that you're all on. But thanking you for being here today as well. If you'd all like to say a one-line goodbye and what your needs mostly are at this moment in your campaign, that'd be great. Elisa, go ahead and start to close us out.
I just want to thank the Victory Fund for all of your support, and for being in my corner. This has been quite challenging, right? Being one of the first, hopefully the first of many to come. We are running a very historic campaign, one that allows people to come out of the shadows and to see themselves reflected for the first time in their elected officials and in their candidates, rather, and soon to be elected officials. The campaign represents the upending of the status quo, and we need all the support that we can get. And so if folks are watching, please go to elisacrespo.com and hit the Take Action button, and please sign up to phone bank or text bank for our campaign. We have an election date coming up right around the corner on March 23rd of 2021. So thank you, Sean. I appreciate you so much, and much respect to my colleagues, Marty and Crystal.
Of course. Crystal?
Yes, thank you to the Victory Fund for the support. Thank you to my peers on the campaign trail. Thank you to you, Sean, for hosting this conversation today. And yeah, I mean, if folks would love to sign up, we would to volunteer and join our campaign, we'd be grateful for that. You can do so at crystal4bk.com/take-action, or you can just go to crystal4bk.com and learn more about our campaign. We can use all the support and volunteers. You don't have to be in New York to volunteer with us. You can be anywhere in the country. You can participate in text banking and phone banking. So don't worry, wherever you are, if you're not in New York, you can sign up to volunteer with us as well.
Excellent. And Marty?
I'm just always so honored to participate in a Victory Fund event. Victory Fund was the first big endorsement that we got, and I was so honored to receive it. And I'm always just, like I said earlier, like in awe of Elisa and Crespo and the work that they've been doing for years in their communities, you know, for long before their campaigns, because they care about the people that they're running to represent. And representation matters. The three of us here are running historic campaigns for queer representation in city council. But queer representation means fighting for housing justice for all, environmental justice, transportation equitability for our small businesses, our workers, for racial justice, because queer people make up every walk of life, and our voices must be heard at the table. So I would love if people watching want to phone bank and text bank and join our campaign. It's martyformanhattan.com. I'm excited to be in this race. And I'll just close with this. I had an instance. This is why queer representation is important. I had a person who is very politically powerful in New York call me one day to say, you shouldn't worry too much about your pronouns. You're always writing about how people get your pronouns wrong. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal, because it is important that we as people see everyone for who they are and validate who they are, because they matter. So by having a trans woman of color running in the Bronx is a big deal. Electing the first gay Black woman who will represent parts of Brooklyn is a big deal. And electing a non-traditional drag queen, non-binary candidate is a big deal, because our voices have never been heard at the table of governance in this city. And it's time to make that change now.
Period.
And that's a great place to end it. That's exactly why Victory Fund is here. Thank you, Elisa, Crystal, Marty, for being here and for being those kind of leaders. You can catch us again on our next edition of Victory 2021, and have a great day.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.